And we're
Good
live.
afternoon, good evening, good morning, whatever time it is for you guys. Welcome back to the Leadership Zoomcast. So here we are, episode 9. I mean, it only feels a little while ago that we did episode 8, but anyway, we're here for episode 9. Neil, good to see you. How you doing?
I'm great, thank you. Absolutely fantastic. I'm also delighted that we're joined by another guest today. So I'd like to welcome Viviane Joynes, who's Managing Director for EQS UK. Welcome, Viviane.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Hey, Viviane,
Good.
welcome to the session. Welcome. Good to see you here.
Yeah, and actually, I think we need to change our background because Viviane looks a lot better with a white background than we do with a purple background here, actually.
We're probably due for a change anyway, but maybe it's Viviane just looks better than us, Neil. Maybe it's that, so I don't know.
It could be, yeah, it could be.
Liking the red top, actually, because we've been a bit boring with our colours, right? So
yeah, maybe. But it's great to have a guest here, and it's also great to have a live leader on the Zoomcast as well, because we've had, you know, old retired leaders like us, and we've had a retired Metropolitan Superintendent, a Metropolitan Police Superintendent. We've had a development specialist on, so it's great to have someone who's in a leadership role now. And Albert and I were talking at the beginning of this. You know, we're doing this Zoomcast is all about trying to find clues around great leadership, and that's really what we're interested in, trying to find clues around great leadership. And Albert, I mean, I know we talked about it at the beginning of this.
yeah, I think you've got a branding that we might be launching soon, Neil. Is it? We're going to go with that? We're going to keep that secret for the moment.
Well, we were talking about maybe the leadership detectives trying to uncover clues of great leadership. So that might be. But the point we're making is it's not about us. It's not about us. We want to try and uncover clues, which is why it's great to have a guest here to help us, because we don't know everything. We might think we do, but we don't. And it's great to have someone who can help us uncover that. So maybe, Viviane, you could just tell us a little bit about your background and where you come from.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I won't go into too much detail, but I suppose if we go back to the beginning, I was born in France, and I've spent the last sort of 20 years in the UK. So have that kind of mix. I've basically been working in the city since 2005, so about 15 years, in various different roles. I suppose for the first 4 or 5 years, I was in a real startup. It was a governance consultancy. Then moved to a very large FTSE 100 and started a business within the FTSE 100. And then for the last 3 or so years, I've been at EQS Group, which is kind of a small to medium-sized company, and I'm running the UK team there. So yeah, that's a bit of a quick breeze through in a nutshell.
So how long have you been in a leadership role?
It's funny actually, because the way I ended up in a leadership role was a bit strange. So in the first company that I worked for, as I said, I was there for about 5 years, and I think about 3 years in. So it was run by 3 partners, and it was only 10 of us or so, and it was really sad in the sense that one of them passed away from cancer, but it was backed by a private equity firm, and it was just proving quite difficult to sort of grow the business, particularly in the UK. We were doing pretty well in Europe. I was running the French market at the time, but it was a small company. And then one day I got a call from the private equity company just saying, "Do you want to have a go at leading it? It's not really working. Do you want to have a go?"
Wow.
Which was frankly a bit uncomfortable, because the partners were equity partners and I wasn't an equity partner. But you know, I did speak to them about it, because I think, you know, it was a genuinely uncomfortable situation. Probably a lot of learning points from that, in terms of just transparency and having some quite difficult conversations. And they were uncomfortable, but they were okay with it. And I just kind of thought, well, it's not very often you get an opportunity like this. So took it, and then I've been in leadership roles of teams of varying different sizes, probably maximum about 30 people, until today at different places. So yeah.
Was there so there was obviously some hesitation from you to immediately say yes. How did you get over that? There'll be people listening to this who will have similar offers
Yeah.
How did you get over that?
I suppose I just have a philosophy that you just got to give things a go, and do your best. And my thing is, if I do my best and I fail, I'm okay with it. If I haven't done my best and I fail, then that's not great.
Okay.
But I'm quite okay with putting myself up for the challenge and then just trying to make it a success.
Yeah.
Which is a great way of living. I love that. You know, I give myself a go and back myself and do my best. And if it doesn't work out, at least I do my best.
Yeah.
But what do you think makes you like that? Because that's quite an interesting step to kind of go, I'll push myself and give myself a go, because not everyone's like that.
It's a funny thing, actually. I've been thinking about it a little bit recently, because I think, so just before we started recording, we were talking a little bit about females in leadership positions. And I think one of the things that I notice, and that there's written a lot about actually, is that women are much less likely to go for opportunities, and also much less likely to maybe identify opportunities and put themselves forward for an opportunity that even hasn't really been publicly announced. And I have done that a couple of times, and I was thinking recently about why that was, and I happened to watch a TED talk, which was absolutely fascinating, about a female firefighter. And she was talking about raising young girls, and how parents will often say, be careful to a young girl much more than they'll say, be careful to a young boy, despite the fact that they might be doing exactly the same thing, etc. And that got me thinking about my own childhood. And I was thinking, I used to climb to the top of our climbing frame and jump off it, and no one would tell me to be careful. I mean, maybe they should have been telling me to be careful. I'm still here, so I'm okay. But I think when I thought about it, I was like, maybe that's part of it. Maybe just through being allowed to push my own limits, and I was always a bit of an adrenaline junkie, that just kind of transfers into different parts of life. I mean, I do feel fear and I am scared of new challenges, and I lose sleep over new challenges. So it's not that I'm kind of emotionally immune to things. It's just that I'm just willing to try, I think.
Fear is healthy, right? Fear is healthy because fear makes you think things through and helps you find a way, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that you know, that's all part of it. It's kind of, I suppose the other thing to bear in mind is that I get bored quite easily. So without sort of new challenges and new things to learn and new things to read about and watch, and you know, watch this kind of thing, for example, I stagnate a bit. So that's probably all part of it as well.
These are only 30 minutes, Neil, right? So hopefully you won't get bored in that time, Viviane.
Yeah, well, my attention span isn't great anyway. So, so one of the things that I'm just really interested. So someone who's been brought up, maybe it's the way you've been brought up, and you haven't been treated in the be careful way. But when you're working with other women in business in your teams who might have been brought up like that, how could you help them, or what advice would you give to someone to another leader? How could you help those people feel comfortable stepping forward?
Yeah, I think I suppose there's a number of things. I think what I always think is, once you've done something once that makes you uncomfortable, obviously what makes you uncomfortable changes over time. So my advice is always try to volunteer for things that just feel uncomfortable, you know, even if it's doing a research project. I remember in my first role, I said that I would do a marketing plan for the business. I'd never done a marketing plan. I didn't know what I was doing. But it was really interesting, and I, you know, researched on the internet and kind of looked at what to do and put it together, and understood the landscape, the competitive landscape a lot more. So that's what I always kind of recommend. And I think, you know, so for example, in the current team, you know, sometimes client conversations can be really difficult, and I could step in and I could say, as the manager, you know, it's okay, I'll look after it. But frankly, I would rather not. And I think just by doing the things that make you feel uncomfortable, I think then you're just in a better place to feel more comfortable when you're uncomfortable. I think that's probably what it is. It's kind of not being frozen by that uncomfortable feeling, because we all get it, however senior we are, I think, and however experienced. It's just how you manage those emotions, I think, at that time.
So you're building that uncomfortable muscle, that muscle of being uncomfortable as often as you can. So when you're leading, do you create opportunities then for your male or female, because this is true, male or female, making yourself uncomfortable? When you're leading your team, do you create opportunities for them to step outside their comfort zone and be uncomfortable?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think first of all, I start, I guess, with the position. I always start with trust. So, and I don't like micromanaging because it just it's not my style. It takes too much time. And I like hiring, I suppose, really enthusiastic, passionate people, which I have in my current team, and they're amazing to work with. But I think we're always looking at ways, well, I suppose as a team, we just have an ethos to, like, okay isn't okay kind of thing. So, and that I think hopefully permeates everything we do. So I think as part of that, we're always trying to push each other and ourselves to try out new things. And every time you try out something new, it's always a bit uncomfortable. We try and, you know, encourage people to do a bit of public speaking, get on webinars, do things they haven't done before. And I suppose the other thing is, you know, we have monthly one-to-ones, you know, and there's obviously the performance management side of things, and it's kind of encouraging people to find, I suppose there's the time, you know, growth edges, like where do they really want to push themselves and how can I support them in doing that.
Wow, there's loads in what you just said. I'm just interested because I see Albert is just, because I know you and I know the team, and I can see Albert's eyes going. So Albert, what's on your mind? Just listen to what Vivian said there.
I mean, to be honest, the first thing that just triggered me was the trust thing, right? Because that trust has come out in every conversation that we've been having with leaders or even with ourselves. So that trust thing is absolutely key. But the thing that I was thinking while I was listening to you is we do a lot because we learn by example, right? So I was kind of interested in what you expect from a leader, because you're working for someone, I suspect. I guess there's someone above you, I don't know. But I was interested in what you think, because the way that I think you've developed your style over a period of time from the roles that you've performed.
Yeah.
You've gone into uncomfortable situations. And I think the phrase, Neil, is, you know, no growth comes from comfort, right? We have to be in uncomfortable situations to find the growth and the development. Mm-hmm. But I'd be interested in what you think about what you expect in a good leader.
It's a good question. I think when you ask that question, I think about a couple of, because I did think about this a little bit beforehand, a couple of people in my life that I think have been amazing leaders. And the two that come to mind are actually my current boss and a guy called Charlie Dark, who ran a running crew that I was a member of called Rundown Crew. Right. And both of those people, so they were, you know, so Akim Vike, for example, our CEO, is very good at setting the vision. He reminds people of the vision. He explains the why of what we're doing. And I think that's always really key, coming back to the why, not kind of forgetting to come back to the why.
Yeah.
You know, kind of clear communicators, not scared of having difficult conversations, because I think that's always a problem when people kind of avoid those conversations, because my view of them is that yes, they're uncomfortable, but usually something good comes out of them.
Yeah.
Usually. But I think the thing that really, with both of those people, I've found really inspiring is that you know, you talk about tone from the top a lot, but actually people that genuinely embody the culture of the organization. So Akim, for example, is the founder and CEO of EQS, and when I joined, so there's 5 values, but the 2 core ones that were there when I started were team spirit and passion. And when I joined, obviously I'd met him and I thought I could learn a lot from him, and I joined. And then I went to Munich for the first time, the headquarters of the company, and I was talking to all these people, and went to a kind of social event. and this team spirit and passion was just everywhere. And I was like, this is kind of strange. Like, how have people been brainwashed in this way? But actually, it was really genuine, and so he sort of reminds people of that, and make sure that, I guess it's his approach. It's the things that are important to him permeate the organisation and actually make it quite a special place to work.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the same with Charlie Dark. I mean, that was an environment where running was kind of just a vehicle for everybody to support each other to be the best that they could be. And as cheesy as that sounds, it's the most positive environment and the most positive group of people I have ever been in. Like, no envy, whether somebody had run a 5K, an ultra marathon, whatever, they got the same amount of applause, the same amount of support. And that was a real learning experience for me, because I'd never been in an environment like that kind of was so supportive. So yeah, I mean, I guess there's the kind of standard things that you expect from a leader, but I think the thing for me that has really inspired me in leaders are those that have created, and you can see them be kind of the starting point of that culture that people really buy into, and they create a following.
Sorry, go on, Albert.
Can I just touch a bit more on that thing around the passion and the enthusiasm, and then just pass back to Neil? Do you think you hire that, or do you think you create that?
I would say I think it's probably a combination of both, because I think there is a very clear, we talk a lot about the culture in what we do, and we sort of bring it into conversations. But I think there's probably an element of trying to see that in the hiring process, for sure. I mean, diverse, I always find this kind of topic really interesting, because obviously you want people to fit within the culture, but you also want diversity of thought and diversity of approach and all of these things. So I guess you're trying to achieve the balance between the two, because obviously if you have a whole bunch of people that are the same and think the same way, you're not gonna be as successful as you could be. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think you're right. I think you hire, personal view, I think you hire at least those that have got the potential to then fit with the world that you create.
I think you're right.
Neil.
Yeah, and I guess I'm thinking of this kind of uncovering clues here, because it's great that Akim can create that teamwork and passion in the business, and it flows through. What I'm really interested in is how does he do that? How does that happen throughout a big organization across multiple countries?
It's a good question. I think it has to be I think part of it is the people that have been hired.
Okay.
I think that is part of it. And so from a personal perspective, what I find really easy, and this is easy for me working for EQS, is that I feel completely aligned with the values of the organization. So I'm not having to, I can kind of bring my full self, if you like, to work, and not have to try to shift myself into somebody else.
Right.
And so I don't know whether I don't live the culture, but in a sense I do. I mean, it's just a natural thing. So I think that's probably part of it, is making sure that you have the right local leaders in the different countries. And then also within Munich, within Munich there's kind of 200 people. So it's not, hundreds of thousands of people in the organization, but it's still enough that you have to make you have to make an effort to make sure that the culture, and that is a big question, and as the company grows, is making sure that culture stays, because it makes the company a special place to work.
Is it that what I've seen in other companies, good and bad, by the way, because is that when there's a consistency of message and there's a consistency of actions from the top down, so the standards are upheld, the values are upheld, and so it's not, here's our set of values, and then there's the management team doing something completely different here. I mean, you see that in government sometimes, obviously, as well, don't you? But it's that so do you see that consistency from the top down then?
Yeah, I think so. Definitely from the top. I mean, you always have subcultures in organisations. I think that's inevitable. And there's always areas of improvement. And I think, that's just kind of normal. But I think there is, I mean, as I said, the CEO embodies it. I think the management board embody the culture. And you're absolutely right. So that's something that I talk to people a lot in interviews about, is that, having worked in different places, there are places that people really wouldn't be able to tell you what the values are, despite the fact that they're plastered all over the wall.
Yeah.
They don't feel them, they don't live them. So I think you're right. I think there has to be a level of consistency for people. But I think it's important that people I mean, it's pretty obvious to say, but genuinely buy into the values.
Yeah.
It's interesting actually, Neil, because our magic list that we've talked through a number of times was just endorsed again by Viviane, right? Yeah. So setting the vision, clarity of direction, good communication, taking on difficult conversations, creating the right atmosphere. I mean, unless you've watched all our videos, I mean, maybe you've watched.
Yeah, but it's not rocket science, is it? So why isn't everyone a great leader?
Well, there is some secret sauce as well, right? And some secret sauce in there, I think, is about characters and the way that you conduct yourself, and it's about your values, right? And some of this stuff, we've talked about it before. Can you teach it, or are you born with it?
Yeah.
In fact, 15 years, Viviane, you've had a pretty good run. You've made some really good progress in your career. There's probably a ton more to go. If you were advising people from here, let's take two dimensions, right? One, an experienced leader. And two, an aspiring leader. What advice would you give them?
I would say, well, I'd come back to the do things that make you uncomfortable. That just always kind of, that's always there. I would say try to, or if you don't naturally, try to really understand people and what gets them going, I suppose. I mean, it depends on people's approach. I'm very collaborative, and I would much rather that people have full ownership of their own objectives and goals. So I think it's around just trying your best to understand the people around you. I suppose working on influence is another thing that's really important. So, when you've got a team, particularly when you're in a larger organisation, a lot of the time you're going to need to be really backing that team and trying to get things that will help your team to achieve their objectives, and that's about influencing others. So I think that whole influence piece is something that's really key. I suppose influence and negotiation are really important aspects.
Okay.
On top of the other things.
That's what we haven't heard before, so that's really interesting. Just want to expand that a little bit, given that's a kind of new area. What do you mean by that?
I suppose, so, I mean, in different organisations, they'll be structured differently. And at EQS, I mean, it's amazing. We have a lot of autonomy as a subsidiary, which is great, but we rely very much on headquarters for certain things like product development, etc. And because we work in so many different markets, there are different market dynamics, there's different product requirements. And so, for us to be able to achieve our goals, we need our products to be in a certain place that might be different to what is required in Germany, France, Switzerland, for example. So I guess it's being able to, I suppose, network within the organisation, establish the right connections, build connections within the organisation.
Okay.
So that first of all, you've got the people to go to, and then secondly, when there are things that come up, be able to articulate why things are important, and try to align them also with the strategic direction of the whole organisation, because obviously, you know, if you just come at it from your own perspective, you're probably not going to get very far.
Yeah,
but I would say that that's quite important.
Yeah, that's really interesting, actually, because what you kind of, if you don't do that, you're isolating your team. You're not doing the best for your team as a leader. So leading downwards is important, and all the things you've said, and there's a lot you've glossed over, by the way, I'm going to come back to, because there's some great stuff there about leading down, but leading up and sideways is also really key to you being the best leader you can be for your business. So there's one question I want to come back to, because you've used the term a couple of times, and I think this is worth just exploring a little bit. It's difficult conversations. So how do you approach difficult conversations? What do you think works really well? What's the secret sauce for that?
Having them, first off.
Don't avoid them.
I would say is probably the first. And not being scared to just put that in the diary and have the conversation. And then I think it's about listening, usually. Listening, understanding, you know, because whatever it is, there's usually a reason, you know, as to why things are the way they are. And then try and reach common understanding and a way forward. I mean, I remember this was years ago, and I have to say my leadership style has changed a lot over the years. And I was running a team when I worked at Capita, and there was a girl on the team who and that kind of it was just difficult. She sort of was clearly quite frustrated with what she was doing, was sort of very obviously unhappy. And it was creating ructions. It was creating ructions in the team. There was an atmosphere the whole time. And I remember, and I did put it off for a while. And it was a big learning, actually, for me. And then eventually, you know, it was like it couldn't really go on. So we had to sit down and go through it. And it was such a hard conversation at the beginning, because there was kind of quite personal stuff that was being thrown in my direction. Some of it justified, so that's fair enough. But in the end, it ended up being, you know, we were both really honest with each other, very honest. And the first half of the meeting was frankly awful. And then frankly, it was like night and day after that meeting. So I just think there was a really big lesson on giving someone the opportunity to be heard and understood. And you know, we actually became friends after that. So, and that would never have happened.
But you see, what you've just said there is really, really important. You use the word heard and understood rather than tell and communicate. That's a completely reversal of what we see in some leaders.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
That you are having a conversation with someone to help them be heard and understood. You know, that's really powerful. And anyone who's listening to this, that's a really important point about leadership. We talk about communication a lot when we talk about these Zoomcasts. Communication isn't all going in one direction. It has to be coming the other way as well. Really important.
We're pretty close on time here, right? And
okay, let's move on to a couple of fun questions, then, shall we?
Well, I think we can't not ask Viviane questions around female leaders, right? I mean, we've got a great female leader on with us here. And it'd just be good to get your view, Viviane, in terms of being a female leader. How have you felt that that's worked for you, or it's been challenging for you? What's your opinion of that? I know we talked before the recording that you don't know because you've only got the perspective of being female, but
yeah,
what's your thoughts around female leaders versus male, or any position you want to give us on that? It's your opinion.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's I guess it's my normality. So I'm not sure. And I think a lot of the male leaders in EQS actually have a lot of sort of what would be called feminine leadership traits. So I actually think there's a broader shift actually in terms of leadership style to incorporate more what would be deemed feminine traits. I mean, you know, my approach is and I don't think I represent women by any stretch of the imagination, but I think, you know, I suppose when you talk about it, it's kind of usually a very collaborative style.
Mm-hmm.
So the aim being that the team have ownership. There's probably kind of a lot of empathy in the way things are. But when I said earlier that my leadership style had changed, I would say that as a young leader, I didn't have much empathy, and I think that's where I really fell down. And I think, you know, I was often called professional, which I don't think. I'm not called professional anymore, so I'm not sure that. But I would say, yeah, I mean, I think empathy is really important, understanding where people are coming from. I mean, often it's kind of a coaching kind of style, again, coming back to kind of helping people get the best out of themselves, as opposed to from the top kind of telling them what they want.
Mm-hmm.
So they're the things that I suppose initially spring to mind, but I think there's been, you know, there's a lot of literature on this topic, obviously. Whereas I guess, you know, if you're looking at traditional kind of male characteristics, it would be much more directional, very, very ambitious. I don't think we lack ambition, but I think it's more of a kind of team ambition, as opposed to necessarily kind of a leader ambition. I'm trying to get it coming up from everybody.
And in fact, one of the things I've learned spending time with you over the last couple of years, you know, I come from a very classic sales director type background, which is it's all about yourself, it's all about hitting your number. And actually one of the things I've learned from you is about that team and pulling the team together and collaborating, which I've seen work in your team. You know, so I think that's a really important message to the power of the group. It is actually a really powerful, a powerful trait to have. Yeah, and that's, and while we're talking about women in business, you launched an initiative last week, which I thought we couldn't really have without mentioning on here. So do you just want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, I launched a project called We Are Catalysts, and the aim of it is to create a community of women leaders, business leaders who and the objective is to support each other in growing our businesses, but also to have a kind of positive impact on society more generally. So whether that be through actually our businesses themselves and what we can do there, because obviously there's, you know, a lot we can do, whether it's, you know, diversity or kinds of topics like that, or supporting each other to do things outside of work that fulfill kind of more social impact kind of purposes.
Okay, how many people are you expecting in that group?
It's right at the beginning. So the idea is that I run a pilot, which would be actually kind of facilitated sessions over a few months, every fortnight, and then we'll kind of see how things evolve from there. But yeah, I mean, it's really in its infancy. But I mean, essentially, it came to me because you know, when you're in a leadership role, yes, of course, I have my manager, I have other people to speak to, but I think it's just really refreshing speaking to people in a similar type of role, that also have this kind of broader societal impact piece as well. So yeah,
brilliant. And I wish you luck with that, and we'll put a link in the notes below to We Are Catalyst as well. So
I've already had a couple of ladies from my network come back to me saying they were looking forward to contacting you, so I hope they make the cut, Viviane.
So Albert, let's start wrapping up. Have you got a last question or a couple of questions you'd like to ask?
No, the only thing I would say is 30 minutes plus have just gone, Viviane, right? Thank you very much for your engagement, your openness, and your sharing with us here about your career and your thoughts. So yeah, for me, thank you very much for spending the time with us. It's been really useful, and I hope our audience really enjoy it. So yeah, thank you. Neil, back to you.
So I'm going to ask one final question, if that's okay. I know we're a little bit over time, but I just, because one of the questions I like to ask at the end of these is, if there was one question you could be asked about leadership, what question would you like to be asked?
I think probably what's the best piece of advice you've been given, I think is always an interesting one.
Okay. And what would your answer be?
And my answer is to listen. I remember I went to a meeting with the investor relations officer of Publicis Group years ago, and she was telling me that the CEO there, a chap called Maurice Levy, when he started as CEO, I think it was I think it was in 87 or something. He spent 2 years listening to the business. So he would go to as many meetings as he could, whether they be client, internal, and he would listen. And I can't even remember whether I think he's still chairman, and a very, very successful man. But her point at the time was that nowadays, a leader probably wouldn't be given that amount of time to listen, and to therefore have an impact, if you like. So I guess there's the kind of what people expect. But I just thought it was probably quite simple, but such an important piece of advice, because it's so easy to go in with your own ideas and want to make immediate change without necessarily really understanding the business or the environment that you're operating in. So,
great advice.
Yeah, we've seen that. We've seen that before many times. And but look, that I really, really appreciate you coming on today for episode 9 of this this Zoomcast. I'm not sure what we're going to call it yet. We'll come up with a name for it. But what I love about doing these is just I learn so much about leadership. You know, there was some great content in there, some great insight in there. So really, really appreciate that. Thank you for joining us.
And from my side, thank you so much for having me on. You know, we've worked with Neil as a business for a long time now, and it's always been a pleasure. But also, I was very flattered to be asked. So yeah, thank you so much for having me.
So to wrap up then, to our audience, please subscribe down below, give us a thumbs up, give us your comments, any feedback you've got, please let us have it. And we will look forward to seeing you in episode 10. Thanks everyone. Cheers.
Cheers, Neil. Thanks everyone. Okay.